good afternoon, and welcome. I'm Marcus Pask from Spain, and welcome to Talent Unplugged Across the Pond, the show where we dive into the honest, often messy truth about hiring.
Good morning. I'm Megan Conlon from Houston, Texas, and this is the show coming to you from two continents, two perspectives, one unfiltered conversation about how we look at the recruiting industry.
And today we have a powerhouse guest joining us, someone
Indeed.
who operates between the commercial rigor and human insight. And she has spent 25 years in HR, sales and marketing, operational client facing roles across hospitality, the energy sector, real estate, and FTSE 100 and Fortune 250 organizations. She has successfully navigated roles as a high-performing sales operations and P&L leader, as well as a strategic HR executive. And through all of that, she's held pivotal leadership roles at companies including Accor, Centrica, CBRE, where she most recently led the Global Talent and Culture Office for a workplace of 130,000 people. Her impact hasn't gone unnoticed. She was the finalist of the 2024 We Call EMEA Awards and named a top inspirational D&I leader. Outside of that work today, Devi is also a fellow at the Society of Leadership, fellows at St. George's House, Windsor Castle, correct me if I'm wrong. And right now she is the interim CEO of CSSC, where she is providing financial stability and people strategy. Please welcome Devi Virdi. Welcome, Devi.
Devi. Oh my goodness. We definitely are in the presence of someone I am so interested in learning more.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. Thank you both so much for the warm welcome, and it's lovely to be here today.
Pleasure. Well, yeah, really happy for you to be here. And to give some context about how you've joined this podcast, you are actually one of the inspirations for this podcast. It was from our conversation that we had during one of our coaching calls that we had when you were going through the coaching program of My Business Shaping Your Path. You just left CBRE and were wanting some support on kind of navigating the job market. And through those conversations, I remember you said to me, do you know what, Marcus? You're sharing a lot of insights right now, and there's probably not a lot of people out there that truly understand all of this. And this would really help. Like, do some myth busting, share your experience, help people that don't have this accessibility to myself during that moment. And so I messaged Megan and I was like, hey, I just had a really interesting conversation.
He did.
Yeah. How do you feel about doing a podcast with me? And how about we add something in called myth busting? So you are to thank for what we are doing today as part of it.
Thank you, Devi. It was a wonderful idea. And we've had such a fun time doing it. And it's very apropos that you are on the podcast episode with us.
Love it that, I could support you both in some way.
Yeah.
And that we're here today to talk about some of this.
I think the real question listeners want to know before we dive into the more serious topics is, how is Marcus in his coaching program? Is it worth the money?
Yeah, it's that sort of the movie Show Me the Money. Was it absolutely worth it? Look, I got in touch with Marcus, absolutely right, when I left CBRE, and I definitely say, I'd known of Marcus for a number of years. So actually during his time back in Expedia when he was there, I was actually in the travel sector, so I knew of Marcus, but I didn't know him. And, I had followed him, and, when he then really went out with his own coaching program, Shaping Your Path, based on where I was, I thought it was a no-brainer, right, for me to really get in touch. And, I've had an incredible journey, during last year. It was a great opportunity to get to know Marcus. B, actually, I learned a lot about myself during that process. So yeah, so here we are. And, I will definitely use Marcus, whether it is for, this organization I'm working for or future, who knows? But I think every connection, I think is super important, like that I build, particularly from a coaching perspective for my own development as well, right? Because I just don't think that, you can stop learning as a leader. So yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. So yes. So it's a tick.
Awesome.
And honestly, I think, having someone of Devi's caliber and her experience and being able to help her along her journey, I've learned a ton as well, knowledge around the people space, around Dean, around, culture and what that means about, managing big P&L, managing big teams. Through the conversations actually that I was having with Devi, I was learning a lot as well that I've been able to use in other conversations around, just coaching people. And it's been amazing to get to know someone at that level. And yeah, we had a catch up last week and, it was going to be a quick conversation. It was an hour conversation, just, talking about how we are and what's going on. And I think it's been wonderful to have that experience and everything you hope for from someone that takes my program. Really invested, really listens, really tries to pick up on everything you're sharing. Devi did that. And it was just, yeah, it never felt like coaching. It felt like a conversation with someone that's turned out to be a friend. So it's been wonderful. So
Oh, that's the best. That is the best. Oh my gosh. Well, let's dive in, shall we? I would love to learn
yes.
more since I haven't had the pleasure of working with or getting to know Debbie. So how
Yeah.
did you start your career in HR? So you started
Oh
your
my
career in
goodness.
HR, right?
I did. So I started out in HR in hospitality. Specifically in hotels, very much in terms of building people strategy at that hotel level, rolling out talent frameworks, delivering what we call training and development, versus what learning L&D is these days.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always really curious about how hotels actually generated income. So actually, when the chance for me came to move into adjoining functions in commercial, so sales and marketing focused roles, Megan, I said yes. I put my hand up. That decision changed everything. I joined Europe's largest hotel operator, a company called Accor Hotels. I spent a decade there leading business travel sales, right, across the three regions, APAC, EMEA, US. I left, went to a German travel tech operator where I stepped into my first P&L role. I was a managing director for Northern Europe, so UK, Ireland, and the Nordics market. And it was a founder-led organization, so again, very different in terms of its setup. It was a steep learning curve, I would definitely say that. But I had a sponsor who believed in me, right? And actually, for me, saying yes to those opportunities positioned me, for the MD role and then this CEO consideration piece. Even at the time, I would say that I wasn't fully sure. So yeah.
And you then went from sales back into HR later on. Not many people make the double pivot, Not many people go from one function to another to then back again. Was it intentional or was it something that was really career driven? Was it something that was just put on your plate? Like, how did it come about?
Yeah, great question. Actually, I was at HRS. I joined HRS in 2019. And as you all know, the following year, COVID
Yeah.
hit. I'm in the travel sector. Um, Airplanes grounded, nothing moved. No hotel bookings took place, which also meant the impact on the organization was substantial. So, there was, redundancies, there was a real shift change that we had to make, right? I had to make some very difficult decisions, which was also in terms of what did the office structure look like moving forward? Yeah, when we had zero revenue coming in. So it really wasn't sustainable, which also meant some of those difficult decisions that, when you are leading a team, you have to make. And with that happening, right, at HRS, I then had the opportunity to also really take the time to sort of reflect and go, actually, this is the time that people do need, human-centered leadership. And that decision really brought me into Centrica. So I then went from a founder-led organization in that sort of space, in a very commercial role, back into HR because I really felt passionate the fact that people had gone through so much. And off the other side is it is about going into a space which is about leading people, leading culture through change. That's what transformation is all about. So then I joined, an energy utility company. It's a FTSE organization, highly regulated union environment.
Yeah.
And I was there for a number of years before I then left and went to CBRE, again in a HR capacity in that sort of people and culture space. And then really towards the end of 2024, I parted ways with CBRE and then I took the time out. So for me, I'd say every step of that sort of journey has been, the move, a very conscious move, right, for me. Yeah.
Yeah. And you touched on something there, your role, one of your roles was head of HR transformation, and then you went into a global VP of talent and culture. For people that are listening who might not know that much about the HR space,
Mm.
Why are those roles important for an organization? Or like what sort of things, I know it's a big question because there's so much that you would do, but what sort of things would you be tackling as a
Mm, mm,
HR
mm.
transformation or talent and culture?
Yeah, so I love it. I think this is a great question. I think when people hear those type of titles, they often, they often assume that the work is about policies and processes. But the reality is, these roles absolutely sit at the center of how an organization performs, how it grows, and how it competes. So for me, those three areas. The first part in terms of change, and that's what transformation is, it's about reshaping an organization, whether it's the structure, whether it's about leadership capability, whether it's about culture and the future workforce. So, the work there at Centrica was about ensuring that the organization, had people in the roles, in an environment where they could thrive. And these roles matter. Why? Because they determine whether the organization can actually deliver on its business strategy. So at Centrica, also leading that whole D&I agenda across the enterprise, that fell into that space. That also meant that, one is embedding inclusive leadership practices. You're rebuilding the D&I framework. You're ensuring that what you define as culture across your organization, which is growth mindset, continuous improvement, high performance, the leadership were aligned. And so my role very much was about partnering with my senior leaders that included the C-suite. It also reinforced for me that, when we talk about inclusion, this isn't a whole standalone initiative, folks. This is absolutely a strategic lever for capability. It's about how an organization drives engagement and health. So, what I tackle on a day to day, right, to answer your question, Marcus, is the work spans across the entire enterprise. So a typical week could look like, you're looking at the org structure because you're designing it, you're working with the team in terms of what does that look like from an alignment piece there. You are looking at the planning piece. So you're identifying what the future skills look like, that succession risk piece. You're rebuilding the talent and performance piece. How do you drive accountability and the fairness? Yeah. You're also shaping culture at scale.
Yeah.
How are you doing that? You do that with your leadership team because it's about leadership behaviors that supports the employee experience. And most importantly, and it is important, you've got to partner with your C-suite. You've got to get so data. I'm a big, I'd say data geek, but I'm very big on use your data to influence those major decisions that you need to make, right? Because that's how leaders understand their language. And I guess having sat in those, I
Yeah, you've
get
been
that's
there.
how,
Yeah.
yeah, you get it. You know what's going to make them tick. What is the language that they want to that they will buy into? And that for me is super important. I guess that is my USP. That's what I bring to the table when I'm wearing an HR hat. Is I
Hmm.
fully understand that if I was on the other end, how do I want to receive the message, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So I would say just to sort of caveat that because I talked about one end,
Yeah.
CBR. There I led a global business function. I had an international team. That was about when you talk about talent and culture, a lot of what I sort of said was that it was also about, leading cost takeout transformation program. That is about, a real balance of financial discipline, linking it with the capability of the organization. I had to make sure I was making the right decision for the business. Yeah. And guess what? These decisions are not always so straightforward. Yeah. Nor are they easy, but they're required. But most importantly, my work at CBRE was also about supporting leaders through change piece there, help them navigate the pace that's needed, sometimes, the understanding or the lack of and competing priorities, right? I'd say in simple terms, if a strategy, and I always say this, if strategy is what an organization wants to achieve, when you think about talent and culture and HR, they determine whether it can be achieved sustainably, inclusively, and at pace.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes total sense. And with the D&I space, the culture space, it feels like there's been a lot of eyes and investment and noise around it in the last 5-6 years, and rightfully so. Like it feels like there's been this big shift. How was it for you being a female in this role? Businesses like Centrica, CBRE that are historically maybe not the easiest of places to be in. How was it for you going into those roles as a senior HR leader and trying to get that across?
Great question. Actually, I would say at Centrica, look, it's a British multinational, right? So, it's regulated, highly unionized. I learned how to challenge the status quo. respectfully but firmly. I also learned a critical lesson, I would say, about culture fit. So what am I talking about that? Values matter deeply to me. They really
Mm,
do.
mm.
And actually, Marcus, you know this about me, but so does pace, accountability, and performance. Those three things really matter. And I find that if you find yourself slowing down too much to an organization's rhythm, or if the organization isn't ready for the level of ambition or the change that you're driving, then it's simply not a match. That insight, I think, also, if I think about me coming in supporting the D&I agenda there, actually we had a pretty it's most probably one of the most diverse C-suites that I've ever operated in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So for me, it was never anything different. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
guess I don't see that.
Yeah.
And there's a piece because of my upbringing. So I'm originally from Hong Kong. I've grown up in a culture where I've, surrounded by, Southeast Asians, right? So in that sort of space, actually, you are coming into a space in a westernized culture. You don't see it being too different, if that makes sense. And so then partnering with a fairly diverse C-suite, whether it's you're talking about from a gender, race, or ethnicity lens, for me it was there. It
Yeah.
was there visibly and
It was
invisibly,
visibly
if that makes sense. Yeah. And we had a CEO. I mean, he's still there. He's an advocate. He's a huge champion of the space. So it was, and that's just it. And I think that's what makes the biggest difference. We always say it's all about the leadership. Guess what, folks? It is. If your leadership walks the talk, you got it.
Yeah.
Even in these spaces. And I feel so fortunate to have had the best senior leaders to partner with at Centrica, and I absolutely love that part of my role. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
It does. Yeah, it does. And I think, I think it just helps people understand at your level what it's like, navigating some of these challenges, these roles, in different industries, different functions, because you have such a diverse experience in very different functions and organizations that, you've really excelled in all of them. So it's like, is there anything that people could learn from it? Megan, I've taken over the conversation. I'm going to pivot to you so you
I
can
have a
ask.
question off the back of that because I have championed DE&I initiatives at companies past, and I'm not always met with a C-suite that A, is diverse in any way, shape, or form, and B, champions it. So it's sort of an uphill battle. What advice might you give to someone maybe not quite as senior as you are, but maybe that second layer of leadership that knows how important it is, not just from a culture perspective, but also from a business impact perspective, DE&I initiatives? What's the first or third piece of steps that someone can take in order to impart how important those initiatives are?
That's a great question. There's no shopping list here.
Yeah.
So let me say that first. Yeah. So there isn't a let's go through a checklist and tick everything off, because I can definitely also say that I've been in spaces where I've also been the only, whether it's been the only female or whether it's been the only person that looks like me, right? So just to put that out there, and I think that's super important just to say that, which also means I'm a big advocate and have always been for championing women and folks from underrepresented groups. That piece is important. I think if you are, coming back to the question, Megan, if you are, in a middle management space, or, you're C-2, C-3, yeah, you still have power. You still have agency to actually make the impact, right? Because it makes good business sense, ultimately. That's what it's about. There isn't a tick box piece here. I think that I want to be really clear on that. Your organization is better for it.
Yes.
Because guess what? You will have a bigger consumer base or bigger client base because you've got innovation that is happening within your teams. If you are creating echo chambers, the flip side is you are not. You're all going to be thinking the same, which is why the term echo chambers exist in the first place. So I think it's look at who's around you. What are the thought? How do you think when you're in a team environment? So if you just think about the here and now, is that in your team meetings, are you all coming up with, do you have different insights, different suggestions coming to the table? Or when somebody comes up with a suggestion, you all tend to agree. There's nobody that disagrees.
Yeah.
And I actually think disruptors are brilliant. I think actually disruption is super healthy. Positive disruption and disruptive leadership is phenomenal. To get into that space, you have to welcome it. So as a leader, you have to demonstrate those type of inclusive leadership behaviors. So yes, look who's around you. What does that look like? I'm not just talking about visible characteristics. I'm going beyond that. I'm talking about, diversity of thought. So also, our upbringings are not going to be the same. Recognizing that as well, what's around the table, because ultimately it'll serve you purpose for your business, because as a business, you'll be better for it.
Probably why you and I got on, Megan, because we're both disruptors within our
Indeed. Oh my gosh, Debbie,
Yeah.
it just
And Megan, you could, if you wanted to go down the recruitment angle, think about very intentionally about make sure that, I guess, there's so much here. You could ensure that you have diverse shortlists from your long list to your short list. Be really intentional about that. Make sure that you're working with your TA partner and you're not just going, okay, I'll accept what you've shared with me. Push back if you're not happy with it. That's your job as a hiring manager, So I just think you've got to be conscious. That conscious inclusion piece is critical for that leadership, that middle management piece. And it's not always easy. And I've seen it in the sort of seen it work where it works and seen it work where it completely has fallen apart at the same time.
yeah. I mean, just speaking my language, I just very, very passionate about this. And in the United States in particular, with this latest administration, a lot of the work that we've really been, the momentum feels like it's now hit this wall and we're starting to move back. So it is very near and dear to my heart. And it's just so important for the business outcomes, not just, which is also important, seeing yourself among your peers and seeing yourself in positions higher than you. It's really important. But the echo chamber piece is just incredibly important from a business perspective. So,
and that's that for me. And I think, you're going to touch on this, Megan, either you or Marcus. That's perspective. That's perspective. And if you don't have difference of perspective, that's it. You're done as a business, really. Yeah, you're not going to be able to, when you have a crisis moment, when actually things are not moving in the right dial, how do you all come together and actually think about how do you change or step change your approach? I'm currently going through that in my interim role. So, and actually so many organizations are, and we talked about transformation, it is like the new hot word right now. There are so many organizations going through this, war / change, modernization, whatever you want to call it. But guess what? If everybody around the table has the same upbringing, looks the same, has the same type of perspective, you won't be doing anything that too drastically different, which then also means your business isn't exactly going to go in the direction perhaps that you hope it to be. So it's the politics, it's the risk appetite, it's all of that. It just doesn't land. So as a business, you are definitely better off it. The more diverse that you have in terms of whether that's a leadership piece or as part of your team piece in your organization to ultimately deliver for your customer.
Yeah. And you touched on it, Devi. You are currently interim CEO. What does an interim CEO do? Like, just in general, I know your week is completely different and you've been in it for a short amount of time, but not many people get the chance to speak to a CEO or someone that's doing this role. So what type of conversations do you get brought into? What does the work look like? What are you responsible for? I know it's a big question, but whatever you can share, what does an interim CEO look like?
Okay, so it's more than a caretaker role. Let's start with that. I guess taking the football analogy here in the UK, when you have a lot of Premiership football managers right now who are coming in, they last literally for a very small period of time, and then you have an interim person that comes in. This is very much more than a caretaker role, I would say. In fact, I would say there are a lot of organizations defaulting to sort of the interim fractional leadership piece, not just as a stopgap, but actually it's quite a strategic decision, a choice that organizations are making. And it's not hard to see why. There is a market more broadly. So I'm going to start with broadly. You've got budget constraints, you've got ongoing change or transformation piece that's happening, you've got evolving operating models, and you've also got uncertainty around that sort of long-term headcount piece, yeah. But businesses still need senior leadership. They just need it differently. So in my world right now, for me, the interim CEO role very much was about me stepping in quickly. It was about bringing immediate impact on that credibility piece. It was actually delivering very defined outcomes. So I've got very clear defined outcomes that I have to deliver, and also supporting the team through the changes without that sort of long-term risk piece. Yeah. That's what as an interim CEO, that is actually what they offer. And ironically, today I met another interim CEO of a partner, and it was great to be able to bounce off some of the challenges that I'm having.
Yeah.
And recognize that I'm not alone. I'm not on my own.
Yeah.
And to have a sounding board is super important. So my day is never the same. And I wouldn't, and that for me is I still have, a great relationship with my chair. And that matters. That really does matter. But it is about when you step in, you've got to be able to bring that, impact and that credibility in straight away. Sometimes interim CEOs are also coming in during a period of crisis. So you've got to really dial your EQ up, your empathy levels up right up front. That was a period for me last year when I came into this organization. So it will differ depending on the organization, at what stage and maturity the organization is at. But I hope that helps to sort of give you very high level of what my role currently is at.
Yeah, and I've seen you on LinkedIn, when you're posting that you're going out there to the market, you're meeting volunteers, you're meeting people that work for the business, and you're really listening to what their feedback is and how it's going. And I think that's important for other CEOs, interim CEOs, or anyone in a management role to go out and speak to your customers, speak to your team, speak to everyone. But I've seen it with your post that you're out there and really trying to get under the hood of what's going on within your world, which is wonderful. Yeah.
And need to do more of, Marcus. I would absolutely say I'm not doing enough of. And it's really going, okay, actually, I've listened to some of my volunteers even last week. So that engagement piece has to remain high because there is change, and change makes people feel uncomfortable. Yeah. Change is often difficult because it's emotional. It is also very necessary. That's the other piece here. This organization, CSSC, which stands for the Civil Service Sports Council, we are going through a modernization agenda. So for me, it's making sure that actually I am bringing people along with me at the same time. So yes, you're absolutely, you've got to get out there, you've got to meet people, and you've got to meet people where they're at the same time.
You've used the term human-centric leadership. You were just mentioning how you had to dial up your EQ if you're joining a company in crisis. I love hearing, especially very, very senior leaders talk about how important empathy and human centricity is in their leadership style. Why is that important to you, do you think?
So, Megan, I think it's a wonderful question. It's actually one of my biggest learnings I've had over the course of my career, right? And when I think back on my own career, people is right up there as a theme. Yeah. I have 3 and they all start with P. So it's people, it's pace, and it's perspective. People is number. I do the power of 3. So those who know me well know that I do 3. People, no matter the sector that I've been in, the space I've operated in, whether it's been in a FTSE, whether it's been in the hospitality sector, whether it was at CBRE in a global real estate, or in a travel tech founder-led, or now even in a not-for-profit, people are always the differentiator. That's it. Really important. The organizations, I'm a true believer, the organizations that thrive are the ones that invest in their leadership capability, how they build inclusive cultures, and also create that clarity around expectations. So when we talk about humility and empathy, it is really important to listen. It is super important to listen. I've learned that when we talk about that whole culture piece, it's not just a nice to have. It's a real big performance lever in your organization. I'm also doing an ILM. It's a level 7 executive coaching qualification. It's another way of adding a string to my bow. And through this coaching qualification, it's as an HR professional, if I think about my background, is you're always you're brought in, you understand, you've got to listen. But actually, it's not until I have found myself in commercial roles, leading teams where I've really had to take a step back and go, okay, you got to really sort of dial in here, and particularly during, challenging times. So empathy is super important. It's even more important when your organization is going through a crisis period.
Sure.
Second, pace. So I talked about, I think earlier on, but I think one of my other important lessons that I've learned, particularly in the organizations that, that I've been in, is pace for me matters. It's what I've learned. Values are essential, full stop. But so is the accountability piece, and so is the momentum and the ambition. And I am a big believer. I think one of those myth busting things was about culture fit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you realize that also you are slowing down because it's not matching the organization's rhythm, or you don't match it, or you're constantly having to push uphill.
Yeah.
Because the system isn't ready, that's not a right fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got to be conscious, and that's what culture fit is. It's not about being similar. It's about being aligned on the pace, on the performance, and also that appetite for change. So I think, as you go through your career, one will get to understand what works for them. And third for me is that perspective piece. Yes, I've led, P&Ls. I've navigated risk and politics as part of the difference and working across the different markets. And it's important because politics exists.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And working across different markets, has taught me to read the system. It has taught me to read the room that I'm walking into, and also read the formal structures and the informal dynamics that are taking place. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't understand how the work gets done, if you don't understand the politics or the stakeholders, the timing, that risk appetite, it is never going to land. That's it. People don't talk about that.
No.
I don't know why, but people don't talk about that. That's been a huge part of my evolution as a leader. I am 10 times better now than I was 5 years ago. That's because I've learned. I've failed and I've learned. And so, yeah, so I guess that for me is, I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. And I love that someone with the type of career that you have built is still seeking learning opportunities, continuous learning. You're taking another course to certify yourself. You're taking, you're networking with Marcus in shaping your path. Like, that is so inspirational that you're still harnessing and building your skill set, even though you've been at it for a significant amount of time and you've got the credits to prove that you are very competent in your career. That's just very inspiring.
Thank you, Megan. That's super kind of you. I think continuous learning is just a part of my own professional development, but also my personal development. The two go hand in hand for me. They're not separate. I'm a better leader. I'm also a better person outside of work. So I'm a better wife, a better mother, a better daughter, a better sister, and that's important. Yeah, I mean, I also have children, right? I've got teenagers, and I am just like them at times. As I'm like a sponge. I want to continuously learn, and I think it is super important. I also feel I feel I'm just starting out, and that's the energy I feel I have right now. Like, I am just starting, so that piece, that energy also ignites me.
Love it.
You can see
I
why I
love it.
wanted Devi on the podcast.
Yes. I can see
and
it in spades.
And I love the conversations. Like, this is the flow that we get into. But now is probably a good time for us to go on to the myth busting question. Sound good? So,
Yeah.
Devi, for you, and we've had these conversations, but the myth is, when you're going out there as a candidate, you should never reach out directly to the hiring manager when you're going through an application.
A load of rubbish.
Yeah, good.
I don't believe that at all. Don't reach out to, no. You absolutely should. So I'd say, so A, it's false. So
Yeah.
as a myth, it doesn't, it's false.
Yeah.
It's a myth. So let's just be really, for me, I'm really clear on that. During the course of when you and I were working together, Marcus, last year, I think pretty much every role that I felt was something that I absolutely wanted to put my hat in, I was incredibly intentional. So I would say to anybody, particularly at a senior level or any level actually, is don't be afraid to step out of that comfort zone. Firstly, if you're navigating this job market, it is very different whether you're early or mid-career experience. At senior levels, I would say roles aren't advertised the same way. Decisions do take longer.
Yep.
The process is much more about the alignment and the chemistry as it is about capability, right? So my advice on that is in terms of they fall into a couple of areas, actually 3 areas. Here we go. So firstly, get really clear. Yeah, get really clear on your narrative. Yeah. Which means that particularly at a senior level, people aren't hiring a CV. They're hiring a story. So you need to be able to articulate who you are as a leader. What do you stand for? And the value you create. Not just a list of responsibilities, right? But also the impact that you've had, the systems that you've shifted, and the cultures that you've shaped, right? That clarity is magnetic. Second, be intentional. So yes, I think, one of those biggest lessons I talked about, I've learned values absolutely matter. Yeah. But the culture matters to me more than a paycheck. I have learned that.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I talk about pace for me, ambition, and accountability. So I think senior roles aren't just about the fit piece, because there's another myth busting piece there. It's not about similarity. It's about alignment. That's what fit is. So be intentional, go and seek out who the hiring manager is.
Yeah.
Drop them a line, because what's the worst that could happen? They respond or they don't respond. If they respond, they may politely point you in the right direction of an application. Or in some cases, they might even say, yes, let's have a coffee, connect.
Yeah.
It's still a win-win. Yeah. It's still a win-win. Third, invest in your network. I mean, genuinely invest in your network. I'd say at this level, most of my opportunities last year, they came through conversations. We talked about this.
Exactly.
Then they're not through the sort of application piece.
No.
So yes, you have to build relationships with search firms. Some will be great supporters and advocates, others will not be. Yeah, whether it's Shrek or boutique, and they are also there to do a job. I'm very well aware of that, having been on the other side of the fence. So they're also quite want to put you in a swim lane. Yeah, because it helps them. But also network with, at this level, network with chairs, network with CEOs, the peers, long before you also need them. Share your thinking, stay visible, particularly in the areas that you want to pursue, and be generous of your time. Like, I'm a big believer, if somebody does reach out to me and I haven't heard from them for a while, I don't have an issue with that, because I think that actually if you help one person, you know what, good fortune does come back. I think it's important. People remember, how you make them feel, especially in these leadership circles. And the final piece I would say is, so I think we've done a myth busting piece. So I think that's there. The final piece I would say is, stay really grounded to who you are.
Yeah.
The search job market can be slow. I've experienced it painfully. It can be also fairly opaque and also quite political. Yeah. Try not to let that shake your confidence. I know it's easier said than done. Focus on your craft. Focus on your integrity and on your impact, because I'm a true believer that the right role is the one where your capability, your pace, your values, they will all land. So you've just got to believe in this. Go and get in touch with a hiring manager. Don't let that stop you.
Yeah.
That is utter nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah.
We couldn't agree more from a recruiting lens. We've touched on this very briefly in a previous episode, that I would say even as often as once a week, I will have a hiring manager share an email message with a great narrative, Devi, to your point, a story that they're telling. And based on that, the hiring manager says, put that application or that resume or that profile up to the top of the list. I want to chat with them. It happens, not all the time, but it happens. So that's just such a good point. As a hiring manager, have you ever had someone reach out to you, Devi, and you said, hey, I would love to have a coffee, or talent acquisition partner, please add this person to the pipeline?
Percent. And that's what I mean about being generous with time. It works both ways. And if somebody has invested the time to come and reach out to me, I will give my time, and it's my integrity to go back to them. And if they haven't Jory, and they've just reached out on LinkedIn and it's fairly cold, I will make sure that they've applied, ask them to apply, send them the link. And if it's worthwhile, then yes, we've had conversations, right? Before the formal process kicks off.
Yeah. And I think you touched on it there. Be intentional with this message. Make sure you're sending it, you're doing your research on the company, you're adding it into that comment of saying, hey, really like the direction the business is going on, really like the work you've done. I've just seen a product that you've just launched, or I've just seen that you've got extra capital, whatever it is, like do some research, get that narrative into your message, talk about the person's journey that you're speaking to, the hiring manager. I've seen you've been there for a year. What have you seen change? Just make it into more of a chance for them to actually respond back rather than, I've seen this job. What do you think of my application? That is not going to get probably the response. But if you say, hey, really like where you've been there for the last year, and I've seen that you've built the team, or I've seen you've done X, Y, and Z, there's a bit of ego that comes into it as well. So I'm going, oh, great, someone likes me. They're like, you might get a response back that way as well. So I think that intention is super, super key. Yeah, it happens. You hear it all the
Yeah,
time.
it does.
Yeah,
And something else Debbie said before we hop off today, which is just such a great nugget of wisdom: network before you need it.
yeah,
It
100%.
pays dividends. Obviously, when you're in the job market, it feels the most obvious to spend some of your time networking with folks that you may or may not know. But it's also imperative to do it before you need it, both for yourself as a professional, because you learn things from someone else. But then, when you're paying it forward, it's really important. But then you never know when those relationships are going to help support a business initiative or a perspective, to Debbie's point, or potentially a new job. I know my last 2 jobs have been not applications. So
Yeah, it's
so
key.
good.
I think this is probably it for time because
Oh,
we have done 45 minutes. And Debbie, honestly, I think we could go for an hour and a half or
we
2 hours
could.
speaking to you because from my side, it's been an absolute joy. And I'm sure it's the same for Megan. So I wanted to say a huge thank you for joining us, for giving us the idea of doing this podcast from the beginning. And I think this is going to be a wonderful episode for people to listen to, of just your journey, your career, HR, D&I, CEO, like all of these things. So yeah, thank you from the bottom of our heart for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Megan, Marcus. Lovely to see you both. And Marcus, I'm sure we'll keep connected and stay close. So thank you. Thank you both so much. Have a great day wherever you both are.
Thank you. So that
Bye.
is it for this episode of Talent Unplugged Across the Pond. We hope you've enjoyed listening and we look forward to more stories, myth busting, and everything in between. So it's a goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me. Cheers.
Thanks, Debbie. Bye.